Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Canal Days. As always, I'm your host Carrie, along with my co-host, founder of Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Camus. Our Canal Days series delves into the vast collection of historical sites throughout Massachusetts, with Robert's expertise of the local history as our personal guide. Each episode, we uncover history throughout local communities, highlighting their historic landmarks and uncovering their seminal significance. Today's episode of Canal Days, we'll be learning about the West Burial Ground located in Pelham, Massachusetts. So, can you detail the history and significance of the West Burial Ground of Pelham?
Sure, I can do that. Plus, I'll talk about what cemeteries moved into this one, what the arrangement is like in the cemetery, and then what it's like compared to other cemeteries around. So, the West Burial Ground in Pelham is from the year 1771. It's the second oldest cemetery in Pelham itself. It's down a dirt path that you can get into. It's also another dirt path you can get out to. It's about 250 feet off of North Valley Road, near Amherst Road. All right, and it's been called in the past the Cook Johnson Cemetery, which is strange to me because there's no Johnsons buried here, and there's only 3 Cooks and only 1 gravestone of a Cook. So it's very peculiar. Maybe the Cook and Johnson family gave the burial ground away, didn't have many people buried here. All right, and I put the coordinates, since it's hard to find, on my webpage for this one. So please use that. Now, it's very old pre-Revolutionary War burial ground. But all the burials fit in from that year up to the year 1908, except for 5 modern burials. So it's old, but it's not many modern to associate it with it. All right, now there's a lot to talk about here, including the beautiful stones, the arrangement that's very particular, and that moved one.
And recount the former burial grounds that were relocated and combined into this one larger burial ground.
Okay, one cemetery was moved into this one. So when you go to the West Burial Ground, you're really looking at 2 cemeteries. And the other one that was moved was the Bobbenville Burial Ground, moved here in 1938 because the Quabbin Reservoir was coming in. A woman from Pelham asked Massachusetts government, since this cemetery, Bobbenville, was with a lot of the pioneers of Pelham, and you were to take away in their history, could they move into one of the cemeteries that already was in Pelham? And so they agreed, and Bobbenville Burial Ground almost entirely was moved to the West Burial Ground. If any family that had burials or stones in the Bobbenville wanted their family members to go to the Quabbin Park Cemetery, they did. Only a few probably said yes. Most were buried in this cemetery. The Quabbin Park Cemetery has 5,000 burials of people that were originally buried in the Quabbin Valley, but 1,012 individuals were moved to other cemeteries, either on the instigation of the family or the instigation of the community. And this is one. So the Bobbenville Burial Ground has been moved, and I have a nice story about that. And so, when you look at it, all the stones are now inscription facing towards the east, which is not the way you should find a cemetery post-Revolutionary War. They should be inscriptions of the headstone point towards the west, but they all point towards the east. It's the only cemetery in Pelham of the 10 where the gravestones have been changed around. And that's because when they moved the Bobbenville Cemetery here in 1938, they naturally put those gravestones, inscriptions, pointing towards the interior road that brings you in, and that means they're pointed towards the east. And any stones that were behind that one, they shifted around. So there was big movements in the cemetery to to point all towards the interior road itself.
And stick around and we'll be right back after this quick announcement. Are you fascinated by local history and eager to investigate the obscure treasures off the beaten path throughout the state of Massachusetts? Or maybe just seeking an unforgettable cultural activity for family and friends to enjoy? Look no further than Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, founded by Robert Camus. With over a decade of experience, Robert offers captivating tours and presentations of historic sites and landmarks throughout the state. Whether you're interested in canals, cemeteries, charming churches, or more, Robert's tours provide a unique and enriching experience for all. And that's not it. You can also schedule private tours tailored to your interests, ensuring a personalized adventure and unforgettable memories. Perfect for families or groups of all sizes, making for an exciting hands-on learning experience that brings history to life. Simply visit holyokecanaltour.org or email bobcat4214, capital B, @yahoo.com to book your private tour today. So, getting back to our episode on the West Burial Ground in Pelham, Massachusetts. Reveal why the West Burial Ground is arranged in the way it is.
It's arranged in its peculiar way because when the state brought all these gravestones in from Bougainville, they wanted to make this cemetery look like a modern cemetery, where there's no east-west axis and things point towards the interior road or the road that brings you into the cemetery. And they did that here. And so thus, when you walk through it, what you're walking through is the following. In the very big start from the road, you're going through not people that were buried in the West Burial Ground, but people that were buried in the Bougainville Burial Ground. And so these are people from a different section of town, and they have different names compared to ones towards the back. And then as you walk back, you're meeting the older section, and this is the section that this cemetery was made for. Remember, this is a very old cemetery, and thus this cemetery has a couple burials pre-Revolutionary War. Now, when people were buried pre-Revolutionary War, their stone pointed towards the east, inscriptions toward the east. And there's a couple of burials like that, and those two burials are the only burials never moved, and gravestones never moved around within the cemetery. Now, what other things you see are there's two family plots surrounded with horizontal metal posts. One of them in a true rectangle, but another one towards the right back is in a rectangular section, and then it doesn't go in a pure rectangle because the back section slides off and it almost like takes on the form of L, the shape of an L. And that is pretty unique because usually you put everything grouped together in one particular rectangular shape. And so it's a very hard cemetery to understand unless you know these facts about these other cemetery moved into this one.
And it describes some of the significant burials and their gravestones throughout the burial ground.
All right. Now, there's a lot of different styles, limestone, but also some slates. And a couple of them caught my eye, of course. Adam Johnson. He's towards the back. He's with a footstone and headstone. And he's the only Johnson buried in the cemetery. Right, and there's also an Adinas Cook, and he's the only cook buried in the cemetery. One Cook and one Johnson. There's two other cooks, but there are no stones with them. Now, Adam Johnson and his will gave $5,000 to the Amherst Chapel on the campus of Amherst College. All right, there's also an Ebenezer Gray, and if you look at his gravestone, in the front it has a copper plaque. And copper has a property that it kills off bacteria very well. So if you look at below his plaque, it's very white compared to the rest of the gravestone, which is blackened with lichen. And that's because the copper coming out of that plaque is killing off the bacteria and staying very white. All right, there's also a baby section. There's a little bit of Walker Grout in the very back, 8 years old at her death, and she's in the baby section in the very back of the cemetery. Right, there's also a double footstone where side by side 2 names are inscribed with initials, KMC and SMC. All right, and now one that has gone away in terms of the whole situation is a Nancy Gray Park. And she was different because she had a large metal post fence around her grave. And that was probably there to thwart grave robbers. Okay, then there's other cool gravestones with inscription, sometimes with fancy trees and urns. So I invite you to walk around this cemetery.
And thank you for tuning in to our episode on the West Burial Ground of Pelham, Massachusetts. And joining us on our journey through the rich history of the Connecticut River Valley. We hope you enjoyed uncovering some of the hidden and overlooked marvels and their fascinating stories that shaped our past in the state of Massachusetts. A special thanks to Robert Camus, founder of Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, for sharing his passion and expertise with us. Remember, you can find more information about Robert's tours, book private tours, and explore the Canal Days video and podcast series at holyokecanaltour.org. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, comment, and share. We'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions for future episodes. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to tune into our next episode of Canal Days. Until next time.